Now let's talk about systemization. What is systemization? Systemization is either a manual, semi-automated, or fully automated process where you collect all the information necessary to make an investing decision and you create a system with it. So, you bring the probabilities in your favor by using the most amount of information. Preferably, each form of analysis that you're bringing into your system would have a sufficient history so you can perform some sort of a backtest on that, whether it's statistical or whether it's visual. Systemization almost removes all of the human elements to the investing process as well, which is fantastic because this allows us to make better quality decisions without our biases or our heuristics interfering and contaminating with the outcomes. Now, while technically systemization is more of a method rather than a single form of analysis, it's so important that I believe it deserves its own lecture and its own place within the analysis hierarchy. Now, to get you to understand how systemization works in practice, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a casino analogy. Using casinos is fantastic because they operate basically how like an investor or a trader wants to operate. Now think about all the concepts that go into running a casino. Basically, you have a collection of machines and they all are running 24 hours a day. They all have a slight edge to the house, whether they're going to make you lose more frequently or they're going to make you lose in larger magnitude. What we want to do is we want to take this same concept and we want to flip it in reverse so that we become the house and the people on the other side of the equation, the people who are in the market trading against us, they're the people who are gambling. You can see this is the reason why I've spent so much time trying to tell people to be the house and to not be the gamblers, because by definition, systemization is the antithesis to gambling. We are trying to make sure that the odds are in our favor so that we can make the most money. Now, a problem with owning a casino is that we know naturally that the wins and losses for the machines that we're operating are going to be random. Say we open up a casino and 4 people walk in through the front door. You might have one person that loses money and then the other 3 people win money, which means we need to pay out more money than we made and we're already at a loss and we're like, casinos are a scam. This business is a waste of time. Why would I want to own a casino when I could be a gambler instead? Look over there. There's a couple of people that have been gambling and they want our money back. Obviously, we know this is not the correct way that casinos operate from a business perspective. We understand that over a long enough period of time, when the sample size starts to increase, then we will receive the average return of our casino or our slot machine or whatever it is those people are playing on, because we know that there is an edge to the house. We just need to wait long enough for it to happen. Now, here's the problem. If we only have one slot machine and those 4 people came in and they all played the one slot machine, we might need to wait days, weeks, months, or even longer for the accumulated average returns to even out so that we actually make a consistent, on average, profit from that machine over the long run. This is not ideal, and as we know, casinos have more than one machine. Obviously, the solution, like I've alluded to, is to have more than one machine. If we have a casino filled up with hundreds of slot machines, then as all the people crowd into the casino, the accumulated odds will almost immediately condense into our favor. You can see a representation of this on the chart that I have on screen right here. We have approximately what would be all of the different machines. We only have 10 trials here, but imagine this with 100 or 1,000 different machines. And the form of stable chaos that you have here, everything is very random at the very beginning, and then it quickly condenses towards the center, where our average probabilities become more in our favor, or whatever the slight edge to the house is. You can see that the more machines we have, the faster that we can condense the probabilities and bring them into our favor. Another way of saying this is to have more of these machines or more edges that we're working with. It brings the probabilistic returns of that system closer to the present day because we don't have to wait as long for it to actually reveal itself. Naturally, this should be applicable to investing, as you should be able to connect the dots right here. If we have a lot of indicators, if we have a lot of different types of analysis and we bring them all together, we can start to create a system where we're making money more sooner rather than later, using the accumulated probabilities of all the different analysis types that we have in our system. Now, just quickly, I want to mention that the astute students amongst you will recognize that this is essentially an application of the central limit theorem. You can see here this chart on the screen. As we have n number of trials increasing from 5 to 30 to 90, you can see as the amount of trials increases towards infinity, it coalesces around the mean of 1, which is the theoretical edge that we have. Obviously, the numbers are arbitrary, but the more edges that we have, the more indicators we have, the more things that are properly calibrated to give us an edge, and that's key here, not to just fill a system with trash just for the sake of having more edges, obviously you can have 10,000 broken slot machines and they all are giving more money away than they're receiving. We want to have quality edges. We want to have as many of them as possible so that we can accumulate these odds and have them in our favor. Said again, the investing application for this is obvious. We don't want to just have one macroeconomic model. We don't want to have just one statistically significant model. We don't want to just have one sentiment model. We would prefer to have 100 of each of these and as many different types of models or indicators or analysis types as possible, because we want to make sure it's as unfair as possible in our advantage. So how do we bring them all together? Let's look at a couple of the basic principles and concepts of systemization. So point number one, your system when you create it should be semi-automated or fully automated. Obviously, if we're adding complexity by increasing the amounts of edges or the amounts of indicators or analysis types that we have in there, very quickly it's going to become difficult to control. And we don't want to be trying to conceptually understand everything at once. There's a limit to how much working information the human minds can contain at any one point. So if we have a spreadsheet, we'll fill the spreadsheet full of all the different indicators and all the different things, and we will use the spreadsheet as, say, the semi-automated system that keeps track of all of our stuff for us. The side benefit of this is that when you have a sheet that contains everything and you're not using your brain's working memory to try and contain and sort through this information and then deploy it, you're also removing the biases and the heuristics that you may be accidentally deploying into the market without your conscious control. Point number two, you can use diversification to your advantage. When you're systemizing and you have a big list of things, you can see whether you're over-concentrating on one style factor over another. Say you have too many statistically significant factors and you know that you need more macroeconomic factors or more sentiment factors. You can see this visually and then you can weight them appropriately. So this is another advantage. Number three, you can have time horizon classification. So you need to make sure that the systems, the edges, or the analysis types that you're using are appropriate for the time horizons that you're trying to operate over. If you have things that are operating over different time horizons, then you can have constructive and destructive interference between these different signals, and they can actually cause problems. Of course, they can reinforce each other and that they can double confirm certain things. However, when they're in a form where they're having destructive interference, this can cause issues with your models. I've had this previously where I've had to work through it and then separate certain features from different systems so that they're operating over the correct time horizons with respect to each other. Some long-term, some medium-term, some short-term. Last point, systemization can also unlock edge multiplication. So this is where you have a whole bunch of different edges running together, and we're looking as to whether the average signal is going to be telling us to do one thing instead of another thing, or whether the probabilities are this significant in our favor or not. But we can also stack these with other effects, such as passive rebalancing or optimal asset selection. There's a bunch of other ones, but we can cover those later. Just a quick note on sequential versus parallel signals. Just to open your mind up, we're not going to go super deep on this because it's far too complicated for this one lecture. Most of the signal-based processes in your systems will be in parallel. However, passive effects such as optimal asset selection and rebalancing can classify as sequential edge multiplication. Obviously, edge multiplication is the preferred one because it's going to increase the probabilities faster in your favor than doing anything in parallel. However, finding effects that you can use sequentially can be quite difficult. Not many of them exist. As a very naive and quick example of what a very basic system can look like, I have an example here on the screen for you. This is an example of where you have multiple edges working together in parallel. You can have something, let's call it the masterclass system. You have on-chain 1 and 2, macro, sentiment, statistical, average, and technical analysis, or whether that is discretionary or systemized. You can see that what you can do is you can basically just take an average of all of these, and astute investors, astute students will recognize what this is leading to. This will be covered in the medium-term section of the masterclass, which is coming up. We won't dwell on this for very long, but this is a good example of how you can include things in a spreadsheet and how you can keep track of them like so. Now, usually at this point in the lecture, I like to tell a story about how to apply a certain type of investing analysis. Truth be told, the principle of systemization has been the single greatest discovery and principle that I've ever used over the course of my investing career. Every massive gain that I've ever achieved, all the good things that have ever happened to me while investing have come from systemization. Every bad thing that's ever happened to me really has been the disregard of this type of methodology and this mindset behind collecting data and keeping track of it in a very systemized way, in a very emotionless way. So ultimately, this is the reason why I am so keen on this particular type of philosophy for collecting data and also using it for signal generation. So in summary, systemization is the ultimate method of being the house in investing, whatever market that you're getting involved in. It's a method of using multiple different inputs together at the same time, not just your one favorite indicator that you think looks pretty. Every problem is a nail and you've only got a hammer. That's not the type of methodology that systemization is. Systemization is having a big tool belt full of tools that you can deploy at any time, and you have lots of things working together in synergy. Systems that you develop should be automated or semi-automated in order to eliminate human biases and eliminate faulty decision-making choices that any person makes, regardless of your experience level. I believe that systemization is beneficial in this way because we are all humans. We can train ourselves to a certain degree to not make bad decisions. However, really, it's the systemization that allows us to completely remove biases to the highest degree. The edges that you include, the analysis types, or whatever it is that you include in your systems, they should be as diversified and uncorrelated as possible, while maintaining the amount of signal that you need, the amount of calibration you need for the time horizons that you're operating over. This is the reason why really good investing at the highest possible levels is incredibly difficult, because finding indicators or analysis types that operate over the same time horizons that are uncorrelated and diversified, obviously by definition, is quite hard. However, the closer that you can get to this ideal, the more robust your systems become and the higher the quality of the signals that you'll have. Time horizons targeted by your edges should be coherent with the outcomes that you're expecting. If you try and mix different time horizons together from different indicators or different edges and they suffer from constructive and destructive interference, it may even be invisible to you. This is going to negatively impact the quality of the signals that you receive. Also, where possible, use the multiplication effect of layering different passive effects in your portfolios, like optimal asset selection and passive rebalancing. I'll be including more appendices on this later on, but for the moment, this is the end of the lecture. So I'll talk to you in the next one.